motto. I am the professional development director for Demonstrated Success, and I am thrilled to have Sarah Sherman here with us today. She presented for us, I think 2 months ago, and the feedback was so wonderful. She's a really incredible special education teacher. She knows her stuff. Sarah's currently teaching in Portsmouth and doing this very successfully. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Sarah Sherman, and I will be watching also the chat, Sarah, and I'll keep letting folks in, and
Okay.
right, and I probably will turn my camera off just so it's not distracting.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for spending your afternoon dedicating even more time to growing and learning new things. I really appreciate it. I know how precious time is, especially now. Just so you know, there is a survey at the end. If you could fill that out, I really take feedback seriously. I try to constantly be adjusting the workshops and webinars I do. So any feedback is great feedback for me.
And I am going to put the link to the survey right now into the chat, but then I'll put it in again at the end. So no worries.
Great, thank you. For those of you that like to know and anticipate what's coming, we're going to start off with introductions. We're going to get into communication, setting expectations, how to empower our paraprofessionals. I have a lot of resources around student needs specifics, so we probably won't have time to delve into that too much, but I wanted to share those resources with you. And then also creating a time for everyone to collaborate a little bit and share some ideas that maybe weren't discussed, so we can learn from each other as well.
Workout.
So a little bit about me. I've been teaching for 20 years. I have my master's in special ed. I'm a nationally board certified teacher. I earned my postgraduate certificate in applied behavior analysis because I thought I wanted to be a BCBA. I worked with a lot of kids with trauma at the time and realized that wasn't the path I wanted to take, and it didn't totally align with what I was seeing in my classrooms. So I am currently almost completed the Trauma-Informed Practices and Policies graduate program at UNH. I do a lot of teacher workshops. I've been teaching adult learners for 5+ years, and I also am a yoga instructor too. So that's a little bit about me. One thing that I think makes my perspective a little different is I'm still in the classroom. So I'm not a psychologist or social work coming in with that kind of like outside lens that hasn't had the experience in the teaching practice. What I thought we would start off doing is start with a breakout room where I want you to think about how your colleagues and administrators make you feel most valued, empowered, and respected as a teacher. And if we could really stay focused on the positive of what makes you feel most valued, empowered, and respected, this is going to shift into how we are empowering and valuing the paraprofessionals that are on our teams. So you're going to see a pop-up for the breakout rooms in 1 second. And then you might have new people joining because it looks like a lot are still joining right now. So if you could spend 3 minutes just discussing with each other, what do professionals at your school and your administrators do to make you feel valued? We all know those little breakfasts help, but what kind of feedback specifically? What makes you feel seen? So you should see a pop out to a breakout room. Please hit the join button, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're going to come back together. So everyone should be seeing a breakout room to be able to join.
Sarah,
Yeah.
did you assign me?
It might have automatically assigned you. Let me check.
It's okay, but I didn't see anything to move to. I can go in and join anyone. I'm just wondering what's going on with the folks that are still here.
Yeah, I don't even see your name on the breakout room list. I wonder if it's because you're a host.
Maybe. So I think Jennifer Raymond is in a breakout room by herself. I'm going to go talk with her, okay?
Okay. And I can move someone else there too.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Whoever wasn't supposed to be in my breakout room was not there, so I came back.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I tried to move some people when I saw they weren't joined, but
Okay.
so welcome back, everyone. Some of you are just joining us. We're just starting to set the foundation, thinking about how we can best empower our paraprofessionals by thinking about how we as professionals feel most valued, empowered, and respected in our profession. If you could type in the chat box just a couple words about what has made you feel valued and empowered. What do your colleagues and administrators do to recognize you, to bring out your strengths? And I'm just going to read them off before we move on. So I see support, listen and acknowledge problems and concerns, take the time to listen and validate, ask our opinion, tell us we did a good job. Yeah, that feedback is so crucial. Listen to me, take interest in my ideas. Don't we all want that? Ask for feedback. Great. These are all good. Accept our advice, validate our knowledge, acknowledge our strengths, hear out our suggestions. The breakfasts don't help, or do help. I agree, Tammy. Those little morale boosters can make a difference, especially in March. So all of these things obviously are true. They're true for our students. They're also true for paraprofessionals. And as we kind of go through this material today, I encourage you to be thinking about ways that you can just take those few extra moments to make your paraprofessionals feel valued and to help empower them and show them the respect that they deserve in their professional role.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I also want to point out that there's a very high number of paraprofessionals on the call too. So I heard in my group some really nice stories about the culture for paraprofessionals at a school in Timberlane and then also in Franklin. So that was wonderful.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for being here. Allow them to feel seen. Yes, that's the ultimate, right? Is that being seen for your strengths and what you bring to the table. I share this picture before we delve into this content today, because it's really the crux of everything that paraprofessionals are doing. They're the ones that are on the front lines providing the support to our students. And sometimes we can tend to lose sight of, and it can get muddled of what that support is actually supposed to do. And so I love this visual for us to think about. Equality is everyone having the same supports. And when we think of universal supports, this is definitely something, there's a place for that. When we think about the student who is too small to reach over the fence, then they're going to need additional supports more than other people. And that's really the equity piece, is these kids that might need more. And I don't say this just about special ed. I really hope education is moving to a place where we can give kids what they need, regardless of whether they're in special ed or not. And so thinking about this universal design for learning and how can we implement these kind of features in our designing, in our lesson planning, in our decision making, so that everyone can access, regardless of disability or lagging skills or anything like that. And then this last picture is what I really like, because I think special ed really tends to be serving as these blocks. And one of these blocks tends to be paraprofessional support in the classroom, right? We're depending on the paraprofessionals to help give access to these students in the classroom and in the general ed setting. And what I encourage us to kind of move to is thinking about what barriers can we take out of the way so kids can access without being dependent on that adult support. And when we think about it, the purpose is not to modify. We're not modifying environments and curriculum so the child can't do things. We're modifying so the child can do it for themselves. And I think sometimes if we don't have a good plan, good communication, and a good structure with paraprofessionals, a lot of times we end up overhelping and we're creating prompt dependency. And we're also sending a message to kids that they're not capable of accessing the curriculum and advocating for themselves and doing hard things and making mistakes and recovering, when we always have an adult kind of jumping in and helping them. So it's such a fine balance. And that's where we're going to spend some time today, identifying how to communicate that and identify exactly what the role is for that student, so we maintain the purpose of helping them do things for themselves. So when we're thinking about, is para support even necessary? We're thinking about what areas of need there are. We're also thinking about certain environments. So a lot of my experience is behavior background. So there's certain environments where para support is more needed because it's less structured, or there's more kids or more stimulation. For others, it might be content related because that's where their skills are lacking. What we want to think about is what skills students need to learn to be more independent. And the whole role of the paraprofessional should be building those skills so the student can be more independent, not building those skills so they can do what the rest of the class is doing. And we want to help them obviously be successful in those areas and environments given what they have. And the way that we can do that is to teach our students how to access resources and how to self-advocate. One thing that I love about, I think paraprofessionals have this like innate magic in being able to read students and read situations. And a lot of times they can anticipate what is going to happen or the needs of the student before even the teacher does, or peers, or even that student. And it's such a gift to have that kind of intuition. And it just speaks to how well paraprofessionals often know their own students. And so again, I think finding that balance with using that to help the students build their own independence and creating that, teaching them how to access it instead of, telling them how. So we're going to get into that next. One way that we can kind of do this is thinking about how we're prompting students. And again, it's that balance, right? You're walking that tightrope and it constantly changes. And we're expecting paraprofessionals to make like probably 500 calls every day in that moment that aren't on paper, that aren't on the IEP, that no one told them to do, where they're having to decide, right? What is the best thing for this student right now? And so I like this visual because it really gives us the two ends of the spectrum and thinking about how we can find that balance. And so one extreme is when we tend to hover too much and do too much, right? And so this creates an increased or prolonged dependence on adults. It really decreases peer interactions. And when other kids see that there's an adult there to help the student, then other kids are less likely to prompt or to guide or to interact with that student as well. And so it really creates a barrier, even though we're trying to create an inclusive setting. It can lead to decreased teacher attention. I'm sure, especially for the paras that are here today, you can speak to, once people know you're there, they kind of feel like, okay, I'm off duty from this student. It's your student. And especially with one-on-ones. And so that cannot be helpful. It might make the child feel embarrassed or stigmatized. You'll see this. I was a middle school teacher for a long time. You'll especially see this as the students start to get older. They might feel a loss of personal control, and you might see behaviors related to like having someone tell them what to do each step of the way. They're not having that agency and ability to make their own choices. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there can sometimes be not enough engagement. I know at my school, and especially the past couple of years, paraprofessionals have their assignments, and that assignment changes every day because someone's absent, or there's that domino effect where one one-on-one is out and then other people are jumping in. And so how can we create these systems where we can communicate quickly and efficiently what is the need to know information, so paras also feel like they know what to do when they're in these situations? When I hear about a paraprofessional who is not engaging enough, that tells me they just don't have the information they need to be able to support that child. So that can lead to a lack of engagement with others, inappropriate engagement, increased, especially for kids with autism, you may see more stimming start to happen. For a lot of my ADHD kids, they tend to start getting in trouble, do a lot more off-task behaviors. They're obviously not learning skills. So it just really shows the two ends of the spectrum and how we can try to find a place in the middle. When we think of prompting levels, like I said, I've studied applied behavior analysis, and least to most prompting is something that is heavily discussed, especially with kids with autism, where you're using physical prompts. One thing that I like about the purpose of that programming is because by identifying what kind of prompts the student needs, we are constantly thinking of what is less restrictive, what is our next step goal, because we don't want to stay in the direct verbal place. And that's where I see a lot of people end up staying, is they're telling the student, take out your math book, go get your math tools, we're going to science next, pack up your stuff. And they're giving those direct verbal prompts all the time. And what we want to move to is more indirect verbal. What do you need for math? Where are we going next? Look at your schedule. What does it say is coming next? And then eventually nonverbal prompts, and thinking about how can we just give them those signals that we have. My students even know from my eyes, and I think this can be a hindrance as well, because just like the paraprofessionals are so in tune with the students, you know, if you've ever given your students an assessment, that they can tell if you don't say like, good job, or you're on the right track, or okay, they can tell from your eyes, or even just that pause that they didn't do something right and they start to fix it. So they're reading our nonverbal language all the time as well. Even those who struggle with it, they know. And eventually, obviously, independent. And so this is where some of the discussions should be made around where students need the direct verbal, at what times, at what subjects, and constantly thinking about what is the next step, because we don't want to stay, we constantly want to be fading these supports, right? And sometimes we put these supports in place and then assume they're going to be there forever. The goal should always be to fade. This is an example, and I have this in your resource page. This is just a nice data sheet that I use with paraprofessionals so we can start to identify the level of support that they're having to provide for students. This helps make some of the conversations be a lot more objective than they might be. So I have general ed teachers who say, you know, this child can't do anything without the paraprofessional there. And then you have the paraprofessional say, like, actually, they're really good at getting started. They just need help, you know, after 5 minutes when they start to lose that stamina. And so this can really drive some of those conversations. And again, if we're using this, we want to be seeing it be faded. We want to be, if we're doing it right, we want to see the amount of support that students are needing being decreased over time. This is another, this is the same thing. It's just filled in for those of you that like the visuals to see. I try to make things like tally or X oriented, so teachers and pairs aren't having to write a lot when they're collecting data. And even doing this once a week for 10 minutes or in a couple classes over a couple weeks can really help paint a good picture of what level of support are students getting and what other supports they might need, so they're not relying on that. The biggest thing that we can do to help be effective is to think about communication and what are we communicating to paraprofessionals. So I actually have this in a checklist form in the resource page. And this is something that when I have a new paraprofessional join my team or start working with a student, I make sure that I've gone through all these things. Ideally, it would be really helpful to have the general ed teacher, the paraprofessional, and me as the case manager all be able to sit down and go over this together. Sometimes I might assign like the general ed teacher to go over certain things, especially I think like pet peeves. It's really helpful instead of us being annoyed at stuff that each other does. Like if we can just be open in the beginning and say like, I don't want you answering in the class. I don't want you pretending you're a student and raising your hand and being part of the discussions. that throws me off. I want the students to think and have their responses be heard. This is a pet peeve of mine. Or it's a pet peeve when people are walking around when I'm doing XYZ because it's distracting to me. If we can get some of those things out of the way, it will remove a lot of the potential conflict or even just that underlying frustration where we start getting annoyed with each other because we are a team and we have to work together. And these paraprofessionals are coming into classes that aren't theirs. And as I said, the past couple of years, they're coming into a lot of different classrooms and everyone has different rules. So laying this out can be really helpful. Thinking about content resources and where can they access what information you're working on today? Do you give them an extra, math book? Do you give them the text that the book group is using and reviewing? What can they preview when they have that 5 minutes free and the students engaged and not needing help to be able to prepare for the next day? When we think about classroom management, like the teacher really needs to communicate what their management style is, what their procedures are, how they want you to respond to student behavior. I think sometimes we assume the general ed teacher will be in charge of the general ed students and the paraprofessional will be in charge of the special ed students. But we know that it works best if the general ed teacher is responding to everyone and the paraprofessional is also responding to everyone. And so kind of identifying at what point do I step in and at what point do I sit back and let it be a whole group kind of thing. Especially in my history with kids with behavior challenges, coming up with a signal so they don't know what we're communicating can be really helpful too. Like, whether it's I got this or I need help, can you step in? Any kind of signal like that can be really helpful. Obviously, changes to IEP, behavior plans. Sometimes we have a lot of information about families and what's going on at home that really make a pretty significant difference in the student's day. And so making sure, even if it's just a 1 minute, hey, just so you know, Johnny didn't sleep last night. He was up all night. He might need a little extra help today. Or the parents are going through a divorce and there's a lot of talk being had about where he's staying and changes in routine. So if he has a big reaction to a change in schedule, that's why. Also, when we think about changes in expectations, like I said, we constantly want to be thinking about fading supports. So as the student's doing well, I am constantly checking in each month and saying, all right, they're meeting these expectations. What's the next level? And on the other side, a student who's starting to have regressions, especially with behavior, thinking about, okay, we need to increase supervision. And so thinking about that as a spectrum instead of they have this IEP for the year and that's their plan all year. We need to be fluid in how that support can look. And so that needs to be communicated. And then the need to know demographic things. Obviously, ESOL learners, low socioeconomic background, a trauma history, all of this stuff is going to affect a child's ability to learn, and it is going to affect how they respond to directions and how they accept feedback. So we need to make sure that our paraprofessionals are equipped with this information and ideally providing training around it as well. Sometimes I think some of the frustration can come from there not being enough time to communicate. We don't have like a planning period with paraprofessionals and case managers and general ed teachers. Paraprofessionals often aren't part of the meetings and the IEP meetings. So coming up with a system. I have a really hard time, especially this time of year, my paperwork with referrals gets like out of control. And so my paraprofessionals know when my door is closed, I'm in like focus, have to get done, time limit, time crunch, like I can't be interrupted. And so we have other ways. They know they can leave me a note in my mailbox or leave me a sticky or email me. And I have different modes that work for different people. So some of my paraprofessionals have computers and it's easier for them to email. Others, it's easier to leave a note. Others will tell me, can you check in with me at this time when you pull the student? And then I can check in with them then. Whatever it is, just communicating ahead of time. It alleviates the someone coming in with something that needs to be addressed at the wrong time. And I'm not able to be fully present because I'm stressed about getting this eval done before a certain time. And it just can help the communication be more effective. So coming up with a mode and frequency, and then, like I said, the when to avoid. So they know when my door is closed, I am in crunch mode, and I'll touch base with them later. Sometimes we forget how powerful. There's actually been studies, and you'll see this in marketing research, about how much charts, just the charts, make things seem much more scientific and believable than just someone saying like, this is the best toothpaste, or whatever it is. And it's the same with our students. So instead of us just saying like, oh, they're doing great, and they're making progress in reading, we really need to be sharing some of that data with the paraprofessionals. Obviously, we're sharing it with the parents at these IEP meetings. I tend to share it a lot more, not just at IEP meetings. And it can really help especially for those students who tend to make 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and then it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And it's hard to get a sense of whether you're making progress or not. Those charts can really show the trends, that it is still moving forward. There are going to be setbacks, but it is still moving in the right direction. And then having time to debrief, especially after, I think the behavior situations are probably bring up the most feelings in multiple adults. So being able to have a time to debrief and admit mistakes, like there's times where sometimes I jump in too early, and I recognize that takes away the authority of my team when I jump in too early. So being able to admit that and saying, how should you let me know next time when it's time for me to jump in? And how we can make improvements. There's often times where I haven't followed the behavior plan to a T, and I have to say like, yeah, I didn't do this. And it's actually making me think maybe this worked in this situation. Maybe we should try this as the new consistent response instead. One way that I found really helpful to structure the communication and the need to know information is having this template of expectations. This is also in your resource folder that will give you all access to, but really identifying what the teacher will do, what the student will do, and what the paraprofessional will do during the different times of academic blocks. So during whole group instruction, guided practice, independent work, in this next slide will give you a sample of what this is just obviously examples. So during whole group instruction, the teacher is the one that's preparing the materials, presenting, asking questions, redirecting behaviors, giving that whole class. The student is expected, and I make this specific to what my student is expected to do and what their abilities are. So they're working on staying in their seats. They're working on attending to instruction, keeping their hands to themselves. So it tells people what to look for and what to be prompting. And then thinking about the paraprofessionals, they're going to be walking around the room. They might use proximity control if a student is off task. They might provide nonverbal prompts because the student is beyond the need for direct verbal. You can just point to their paper or tap their desk and they'll get back on task. And then redirecting those individual behaviors. So not only is this helpful to kind of structure the everyday, it really helps the teacher and the paraprofessional to identify, this is what I'm going to cover, this is what you're going to cover, and kind of having that agreement. And I also, especially the past few years, have found it extremely helpful to be able to give to a substitute and to be able to give to a paraprofessional who's just jumping in, or even a substitute teacher, so they know what to look for, and so they're really clear. And it's all the information that they need without like in-depth subplans of each block of the day and that kind of thing. So this can be a really helpful tool to use. I want to check in here. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Yep, the sheets are in. I'm just looking through the chat. The sheets are in the resource list. And I did leave a sample and a template, so you could print out the template and cut and paste it and make it your own. But you'll also have that sample there just to see some examples. Yes, Colleen?
Okay, sorry, I forgot I was supposed to be typing it in the
No, you're
chat.
fine.
So I say thank you for the one that is filled out. I mean, I love the template as soon as you put it up, but I see lots of different paras and I'm new to my school. So something like this to springboard the conversation with people that I don't really know is awesome.
Great, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a good problem solver too, when there are those times where it's like, there's conflict, right? You as a teacher are feeling like this pair is doing too much or too little, and the pair is feeling like, I don't know what to do, it's not helping. And so it can kind of help solve some of those problems to come together and put it on paper. You're going to do this, I'm going to do this, the student will do this. All right, we all agree? Cool. Thanks, Colleen. I'm just looking through. Yeah, the new paras, I mean, bless their hearts, man, coming in. Even thinking about paraprofessionals supporting with remote learning and during COVID, like who can't see faces and don't even know the students. I looped with my students, so I can't imagine. Yeah, bless your hearts. It's a great resource, yeah. Okay, if no one has anything else, I'm gonna move on. Here's another one, just thinking about case manager, teacher, and paraprofessional, because these roles can sometimes get muddled too. I know some paraprofessionals like to take on a lot and take on more than others. And so sometimes we tend to make assumptions about what people feel comfortable with and what they don't. And so this can kind of just help take that away. And thinking about, these are the ones that I use with data. I think about data, instructional materials, modifications and accommodations, behavior plan info, parent communication, assessments. Those are kind of the general. You could obviously cater this, only have a couple. I tend to have more in the beginning of the year and then only revise a couple things as we go on in the year. They might not need all the information for the other stuff. And this is the example, a sample filled in for a student that we have. So thinking about, I'm going to make the data sheets and distribute them and talk about what we're collecting data on. The classroom teacher will collect the classroom data. How is it impacting them when they're actually taking the spelling test? And how is it impacting their student skills in class? And then the paraprofessional will be completing those data forms that I'm giving them. And we have a system, I have like a mailbox that all the data forms go in. And as long as it's by the end of the week, and just communicating when, where, how are they submitting it, what's easiest for everyone. I want my paraprofessionals to feel like the forms that I'm giving them are easy to do and manageable. And if they're not, they can tell me. So I'm asking them, like, is this too time consuming for you? Is there a way I can make it different or easier, and getting their input? It just lends itself to those kind of conversations. So everyone is getting what they need and getting their needs met. When we think about instructional materials, obviously I'm making the recommendations, I'm sharing templates, graphic organizers, models. A lot of times I'm sharing the materials that we're using in our session so they can practice it and prompt it in the classroom setting. The teacher should be the one differentiating instructional materials. And I know a lot of times our paraprofessionals are doing this. It should be the teacher. And providing the manipulatives and providing those supports that they might need in the class. And then paraprofessionals are the ones who are prompting and guiding students to use those supports and using those manipulatives. I realize my spelling error here. I'm gonna have to fix that. And this just gives other examples. I'm not gonna read this to you, but thinking about modifications, who's doing what, the behavior plan, parent communication can get kind of tricky. I know, especially with my one-on-ones who are escorting students to their parents, they can kind of get caught in awkward conversations with parents. So to be able to have a system to say, oh, Sarah emails you on Fridays, so I'll just let her know and she'll talk to you about it, can be helpful in alleviating some of that. Another thing that I think is important to identify, and this comes from both sides, right? So paraprofessionals are professionals. And if they're sitting in a room listening to a lesson and the students are engaged and they have nothing to do, it can not only be really boring, but it can feel like a huge waste of your time. This is when you start thinking about your shopping list and going back to school so you don't have to sit here and do this. And so we don't want to do that. We want everyone to have that sense of purpose and to feel like they're being able to give their all. And we don't want others to feel like teachers aren't doing something. Why are they just sitting there listening to the lesson and not doing anything? So coming up with a list of when you're free and just like we do with kids, when you're done with your work, here are other things that you can do. And so it might be collecting data. It might be reviewing data. It might be organizing materials. It might be checking in with certain students. And these don't just need to be special ed students. It can be your 504 kids and other kids that just need that extra attention. If Johnny's fine, can you make sure that you check in with Matthew and Rachel because they're having an off day today? It can be time where they're reviewing previously taught skills with someone who was absent, or even thinking about giving them time to review tomorrow's lesson so they are equipped with the language and the examples and what's going to be discussed. And then they're feeling more confident jumping in and helping as needed. If anyone has anything else to add to this list, I'd love to beef it up. So feel free to put anything into the chat. And I am going to give you time when we do a share out at the end to be able to add some of that stuff too. When we think about how we can empower our paraprofessionals, for me, one of the biggest things is how can I ask permission before making assumptions? And especially after work, like Colleen said, where she's new to the school, different schools do things differently. I came to my school here 4 years ago, and I was not used to paraprofessionals being assigned to a classroom. I was used to them following a schedule. And so I made a lot of assumptions around that. And so what are they supposed to do when the student's getting serviced and they're free? Where should they go? When should I step in when a student's off? How are they going to let me know that they need help without losing their credibility in the student? And we want to avoid interrupting. There is a time where we can, as teachers and case managers, model for students. A lot of times I'll try to sneak into classrooms for an extra 5 minutes and just be able to model how to provide scaffolds for the students and how to remind them of the skills they're working on in my room, making sure they're using it in the classroom. But we don't want to be interrupting and creating that hierarchy that can make it really difficult. I give my paraprofessionals lots of freedom and choices, and some of them have actually expressed that they don't love it, but most of them do. They like being able to make the decision and make those calls and feel like I'm going to support them. And if it didn't work, then we're going to have a conversation about it. And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's just that we're going to talk about how to do it differently. But I want them to be able to, I have teachers who are way better at technology than I am and can be helping my students use those read and write programs or co-writer and use some of those adaptive programs way better than I can. I have others that are really good with some of the sensory piece. And so I have others that are amazing at math and like the way that they can explain number sense, thinking of how can we really give them freedom to use their strengths and expertise and highlight that with them. And by giving them choices and giving them freedom is one way. And then lastly, I'll just add asking and listening. And it was interesting that that was the most repetitive thing that came up in thinking about us as professionals and how we feel valued and respected and empowered is by people asking our input and listening to us. And so we can do that as well. Someone has a magic pen that's, I don't know how they're doing that. I'm going to go through this part really quickly just so you can see that it's here because you'll all have access to this PowerPoint. When I think of different disability areas and just some of the like tried and true tricks that I have and have used, this is what my like need to know things would be. When we think about behavior, thinking about trauma informed. And if you're not already trauma informed, signing up for different workshops. I offer some through the UNH Teacher PD. There's a lot out there. There's tons of webinars and videos you can access through Child Mind Institute. I made a whole resource list of places where you can get more information. But this is really important because it helps us understand how trauma affects the brain and changes how kids are able to respond and where behaviors might be coming from. Because I was guilty 20 years ago of using the language of, you know, make the right choice. And now we know that kids aren't choosing to misbehave. They're not choosing to do the wrong thing. And if they're not choosing the right choice in that moment, it's because they're in fight or flight mode. There's other stuff going on. So I have some resources around respectful redirection, avoiding power struggles, and thinking about prompting replacement behaviors. So instead of saying no, what are we prompting them to do instead? And constantly thinking about, they're currently doing this to get this need met. What can we replace it with that's a little bit more appropriate? So for the kid who's shutting down and putting their head down, obviously that's not expected in the classroom, but how can they opt out for 2 minutes? Can they take a timeout? Can they go take a walk and take a break for a minute? How can we be prompting some of those more replacement behaviors? These are the resources around respectful redirection, 10 better ways to say no. I have this like in 5 different places. I have it in my office. I have it at home with my kids. Replacing that no if it's not natural for you. It's good reminders of different ways to do that because no one likes being told no. I don't like being told no as an adult. I at least want to think that I have a shot of doing what I want or making it my way. A lot of our students are going to need breaks. And I think we tend to think of the kids with behavior problems and challenges, the kids with executive functioning who need the movement breaks, but also our SLD kids who have that low frustration level. Everything really is harder for them and they may need those breaks. They may need the break just to get away and be able to decompress and recharge their battery. Or they may need to take a break because they are getting really frustrated. They're not able to meet expectations. And that's really frustrating when you're trying to do something and you can't. So these are just different ways of prompting a break without saying, do you need a break? Because that's like saying to someone it reminds me of the like, just relax. It like makes you more angry if people tell you to relax, right? It's like, you can clearly see I need a break. That's why you're asking me. So saying, do you need a break? It's making me have to admit it. It's making me have to acknowledge it instead of what do we want the kid to do? These are some supports around kids with ADHD or executive functioning challenges. I really encourage ask versus tell. Visuals are a huge resource. Showing what done looks like. This is a done desk. an organized, done at the end of the day desk. This is a done retell. It has capital letters, the title, topic sentence, 3 supporting details. It shows the student what done looks like so they know how to get to where they're going. And then if you could look in, if you're interested, if you have students you work with ADHD or executive functioning challenges, the research around motivation and attention is really interesting. And it's we know what will motivate kids with ADHD and executive functioning challenges: high interest, competition, novelty, or urgency. So thinking of how we can build some of that in. Here's an example of ask versus tell. Again, you'll have access to all this, so I'm going to go through this quick. When we think of the kids with specific learning disabilities, a lot of what we're doing is providing those scaffolds. And I think instead of giving them the answers, and I say that not like you're telling them the answers, but a lot of times our kids will ask, is this right? Am I doing this right? Is this is this the answer? And then they're waiting for you to tell them. Instead of telling them, instead of answering for them and giving them that answer, yes, it is right, refer them to the resources, refer them to the tools, refer them to the strategies. And again, that's working on building that independence. One of the most underutilized resources and strategies we can use is allowing longer wait time. And it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to see kids struggle. It's uncomfortable when they're trying to think of something and they can't. And we are fix-it people in nature, especially paraprofessionals. Like that's your job, is to help. So to be okay with a little bit longer, creating a little bit more struggle time for students, letting them make the mistake. Sometimes we tend to keep our kids under more of a microscope than the rest of the kids. We're holding them more accountable than everyone else. So just keeping that in mind. When we think about kids with autism, they'll obviously have a plan. I do a lot of listing what's expected and what's unexpected, using visuals, a lot of first then language. And this can be in middle school and high school as well. Even like, first you have to do these 3 math problems, then we can go take a walk outside. First you have to, sit through this boring lesson that you don't want to do. And I even use that language, especially with middle school kids. Like, first you have to do this that you think is boring and you don't want to, and then you can read your book by yourself. And we, even as adults, if you think of what we're doing, like, first I'm going to sit through this webinar, and then I'm going to go get a piece of chocolate or have a margarita or have a green beer for St. Patrick's Day. Like, we do it too. Scripts are a very helpful way, especially with any behaviors. I use a lot of scripts in my behavior plans, just so everyone is responding the same, as much as you can, the same. I know we can't have a script for everything, but just so we're creating those consistent responses. They know that, Mrs. Sherman is always going to say, it looks like this is hard for you. Can I help make it easier? What can I do to make it easier? They know I'm going to just keep restating the expectation, even though they're trying to pull me into this power struggle, even though they're trying to ask a million questions to get me off track. I'm going to just restate the expectation and give them the choice. So these are just some examples, but I encourage you to think with your team about what kind of scripts can help your students. So the teacher, the case manager, the paraprofessional are all sending the same message. All right, that was a lot of information really fast. I could feel my voice start going like a million miles a minute to try to fit it all in. But I do want to give you just a couple minutes before we end here to think about either thinking about your students and how you could start designing this, because we never have time, right? So here's time, and getting started is the hardest part. So if you even spend 5 minutes getting started right now, and then we're going to return to the whole group to share out really quickly. So this is going to be quick. I'm going to go to the next page. If you don't have a student in mind that you want to start thinking about, I have 2 scenarios here, and you can choose whether you want to do the teacher, paraprofessional, student template, or whether you want to do the case manager, teacher, paraprofessional template. And then just thinking about these needs, what would be the need to know information that you would want to include? Okay, so I'm gonna put up breakout rooms, but I'm gonna make them really large, knowing that some people may choose to just work on their own student. So if you're gonna work on your own student, just don't join a room, and then I'll be able to see and can move people around if needed, okay? I'm gonna give you 3 minutes just to get started, just so you feel like I can do this. I have a couple need to know things that I wanna do. Okay, so as I said, the rooms are going to be really big. If you want to work independently, just turn your camera off and don't join a room. I can balance these out as needed, and then we'll come back together in a couple minutes. I hope that you didn't feel cut off, but I do want to respect people's time knowing that it's almost 4:15. So hopefully you feel like you have a start. I'd love to hear anything that someone came up with or wants to include on their templates that we didn't cover, and to share with the whole group, something that we might be able to learn from each other. You can either type in the box or just turn off your mic.
Sorry, Sarah, we got cut off a little early. We had sort of just started.
Oh, okay.
But it got, because we ran out of time. Because you gave us so much awesome information.
I did read a couple chats while people were in the breakout room, and a few people were talking about how they do want the paraprofessionals to be doing the art projects and getting their input and perspective in health class. And again, that's where that just shows how different it is from class to class and teacher to teacher. And so hopefully these templates can help drive some of those discussions. So everyone is getting what they want out of it, and we are helping to guide these students and build their independence.
Sarah, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And maybe you addressed it already and maybe I spaced out. But if there's a document like this, do you keep it in a communal place so that all the UAs and all the different teachers that work with a student can access it?
I definitely didn't at the middle school level, because I had kids in every grade with 6 different teachers, and the UA rotations would be really complicated. So for the UA teachers, I just shared the IEP and the behavior plans. If I had time to sit down with the team, I would love to just be able to share the template. And if they wanted to add to it, and especially with technology now, it's something that could be digitally shared, and it doesn't have to be a meeting with people sitting down together. That might be a good workaround. At the elementary level where I am now, I do share it. I don't share it in a communal place, but we do have a subfolder where when a paraprofessional is out or covering another kind of duty, I have a folder that I can give whoever is stepping in. And these templates are in that folder, as well as like the schedule and some IEP snapshot kind of things. But that's a great question. I mean, ideally, yeah, it would be awesome for everyone to have. I don't want to overwhelm paraprofessionals either with having like 8 different, okay, what's the template for this class? And what's the template for this class? But it does help us keep in mind like what is needed, or even just what those expectations are.
Thank you. And Valerie was just writing. And by the way, I am putting the survey in right now before you, because someone just asked. So Valerie was just saying, and maybe we can stay after, she has a student that for whom everything is boring. So maybe you have some magic advice for that. So I'm going to tell you all, yes, your resources will be sent out to your emails, plus a certificate of attendance, plus a link to the recorded session. Okay, so you'll get that within the next 2 days. I'm pressing return, and the feedback survey is the very last thing in the chat. So you can click on there, and it's super quick. It's like a minute and a half, not even. And I think we will officially end since we are a little over.
Yeah, and I'm just going to include my email address. If anyone has a question, wants to reach out, wants more resources, feel free to email me.
Sarah, do you have 2 seconds or 2 seconds? That's an exaggeration. 5 minutes to stay after?
Sure.
Oh,
well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate all you're doing. And I know it takes more time, which is such a commodity these days, but hopefully it will buy you time and buy you success later down the road. And we're almost there.
It's wonderful.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you all for taking the time.
Sarah and Karen, I was just validating what somebody else was saying. It wasn't actually my own student, but I do understand how difficult it is when you have a student whose MO is refusal, and that it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and you feel
Challenging.
like it's like your responsibility, right? You know, that can be really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't stay, but I think maybe the person who, let's see, was it Lori? Maybe, I'm not sure. The person who brought it up might like to stay. I have to go to an appointment.
Sure.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. I'm
Bye.
still here.
Oh, there you are, Lori. Do you want to chat about it a little?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Yeah, so, well, it's a typical student, autistic, very bright, but also speech and language, but he already has figured out how to avoid work. When as soon as you present the work, there he goes, you know, it's boring, and he has a behavior plan. He's in the social emotional learning. So with all of that, you know, I do what I can to get as much as I can out of him, you know, but I know that he's capable of so much more, and
We always are.
that's right.
Not a lack of skill. It's just applying it when we want them to, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, I think I do a pretty good job with it because I'm a para, and but I do have my certifications and whatnot. But you know, sometimes it's hard to get everybody else on board with the behavior plan and the consistency,
Right.
and just the whole interaction, even with, you know, my role in, you know, that dependency on me as the para. You know, it's like I try to, you know, have the teacher state the expectation so then I can reinforce it, you know.
Yep, exactly.
And I think that's where sometimes there's a breakdown, you know, because they know that if they try to set the expectation, that it's going to go south real quick, you know. And but I mean, he's grown a lot, but
the teacher thinks that.
Well, I mean, I think that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
So that
they don't want to set the student off, so they don't do things. They don't hold them accountable, which leaves it to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the behavior, the whole thing, the classroom management piece, you know, it's all, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So
a couple things, just not even knowing the student or what the behavior plan says. I would try to think about like early level escalation. And so thinking about when they first start showing signs, that's when you might be offering a choice. Do you want to work on the floor? Do you want to work here? Do you want to do this one first? Do you want to do this one first? Do you want to skip all the odds and just do the evens to kind of get that buy-in initially? And then I think on the other end, once a student is escalated and having behaviors, one mistake, and I'm not saying this is happening, but one mistake that I think is really common is we tend to do a lot of talking. Right?
Yes.
We're trying to de-escalate, but we keep talking. And that would be the time where I would really encourage you to restate the expectation, walk away, and let the consequences happen. Like, so if they're avoiding and doing all these behaviors, you're ignoring the behaviors, you're walking away, and the work isn't going to get done then anyway. So maybe it is later. Maybe it's during snack time. Maybe it's during recess. Maybe it's during the end of lunch. Maybe it's a working lunch, something like that. Not knowing the behavior plan, but that's kind of what strikes me and what you're talking about.
And I think that
really tough.
I think the consequences there, like the holding him accountable during his lunch, I think would be fabulous. But you know,
because otherwise they're getting reinforced by avoiding, right? It's working. So why would he do the work when what he's doing is working?
Exactly. And I know we're working on that, but it's a very interesting dynamic because this is a classic example of what you were just talking about. So yeah. Yeah.
I think you should have input on the behavior plan too. I think a lot, I love making behavior plans. I used to do it just as a consultant. But one thing that doesn't happen is we don't get enough paraprofessional support or input on the behavior plan. And then checking in after every couple of weeks, like, how is it going? What's not working? What do we need to tweak? What do you need more information on?
Yeah.
It's tough. Don't take it all like personally. And
No.
it's not like a reflection of anything that you're doing or not doing. A lot of our students are going to refuse. They're going to have behaviors. They're not going to get their work done. And we hope to decrease that and we hope to improve it, but it's not a reflection of you.
No, right. I've been at this a long time and I don't take
you know that you have the tough skin to keep at
it. But it was just it was nice to hear like all the different things, you know, that we are doing. So it was but it was really good to hear some new information that I could definitely put into the works, to kind of like the data collecting, you know, just certain times. I think that'd be a great to get the data points and that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed the seminar, and I'm sure you want to go, and I do too. So
thank you, Lori.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Great night.
Have a good day.
Lori.
Yes,
Thanks,
you too.
Linda.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.